So it's about the middle of May in the southeastern part of North Carolina, and gardening season is underway. And it's this time of year that makes me so happy because everything is starting to grow, and we came out of the winter and we've had this beautiful time in spring where everything's been wet. It's been kind of cold actually, but everything is starting to grow. Everything's just getting established. The days aren't miserably hot yet. And it's the time that we can really enjoy the garden. And I think one of the things that's so important when we talk about gardening is the fact that we enjoy our garden. It's more than just let's grow food to put on the table, because if that's our only goal, it's not worth it. It's not worth growing food just to put on the table when we can go to the store and we can buy it. Oftentimes, for relatively cheap. I know prices are going up, but still, we can still go to the grocery store for now. At this point in time, we can still go to the grocery store and buy food that's relatively cheap. So if our only motivation for gardening is to produce food out of it, it's not worth it. But if we enjoy gardening, if it's a journey, if we're not so focused on the end result, and we find beauty in the journey, we find joy in the journey of gardening, learning to garden, being in the garden, and working with the soil, working with the earth, creating something beautiful, and growing something that sustains us all at the same time. If gardening really is a journey, yeah, we'll get some food. We'll harvest food out of it. But it means so much more than if we're just growing for what we can eat from it. So, I'm going to turn the camera around and we're going to go around the garden and I'm going to show you what's happening in my garden. Please understand that, you're going to see weeds and you're going to see things that aren't perfect. I need to mow right now. I just weed eated a little bit, around the garden beds, but I still need to mow. You're going to see things that don't look perfect. You're going to see things where I'm learning. My hope for this channel is that we will learn to garden and grow together. In the midst of that, we'll find joy and we'll find grace. I want to take you along this journey with me, and yeah, let's learn and let's grow together. Okay, so I'm going to turn the camera around and let's walk to the garden. Look at this. This is a chamomile plant. I probably need to put it in a bigger pot. It's just starting to flower. That's okay. Like I said, I'm learning. I probably need to put that in a bigger pot. This is a dill plant. Here's some mint. With dill and mint, this is going to be a lemon mint, and this is going to be a lemon balm. I just haven't planted it yet. With dill, anything dill weed or anything in the mint family, you really want to put those things, contain them in containers, unless you want them all over your garden. They are bullies in the garden, and they will self-seed like crazy and come back year after year. I actually found, it's funny because you see these this patch of dandelions over there. Behind that patch of dandelions, there was a ton of mint. I did not grow mint over there last year. I grew mint in a pot, but it went to flower and it seeded, and the wind carried it, or the birds carried it. I don't really know what. But early this spring, there was a ton of mint popping up behind these dandelions. So let's actually walk over here to the dandelions, because I want to talk about that. I think it's really funny. Sometimes we just have to let things happen in the garden. These dandelions are native. In my area, they're considered a weed. Dandelions are incredibly nutritious. You can make teas out of them. Dandelion root tea is a real thing. There's a lot of things we can do with dandelions. They're nutritious for you. They're good for you, and they may even have some medicinal purposes. I was mowing 2 weeks ago, and my daughter said, "Mom, she's 4. She wanted to keep these dandelions here. She said those are her pretty yellow flowers, and she wanted them to stay." So I kept a patch of dandelions when I was mowing. And sometimes I really like this random wild patch in the middle of the yard. I think it's fun. So, okay, so let's go and talk about this. This is an apple tree. There's 2 apple trees actually. They're just kind of, this is their 2nd year. I am not an expert when it comes to growing trees. I'm actually not an expert when it comes to anything, but I'm really not an expert when it comes to growing trees, so I'm learning. But they seem to be doing pretty well right now. This is a random raspberry. I started a new bed. This is not perfect right now. This is by no means done. I'm just kind of letting this sit for the moment, for the time being. So this, I'm going to be building a new garden bed. This bed right here specifically, what I'm doing is I threw a tarp down, okay? And I'm going to let that tarp sit for a couple of weeks. I've already been letting it sit. It's probably sat for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, I think. So look, so you can see the grass is starting to die. Now what this does is it's going to make it easier to pull that grass up. It's also going to improve the soil because it's encouraging the worms and some of the soil life to kind of come up and eat the roots and the decaying matter of the grass. And because it's covered, so it encourages them to come up because there's food for them to eat with everything decaying, but also because it's covered, so that we don't have to worry about them being, like, they don't have to be worried about being exposed to the sun. When this is, another week or 2, I'll come and I'll kind of like rake everything. I'll probably, I'll get the shovel, dig a little bit, and then I'm going to add compost. Okay, so what is this? This bed, it's really weird. I dug this trench. I really just did this. There's been a lot of, so I have a lot of wood chips around here. It just kind of break down. I'm just letting that happen. I had to do something with some of the wood chips that I had, and I went and lined all of, well, this bed and this bed over here. I kind of make these beds kind of mirror each other. But right now in here I have some cabbage and I have some broccoli. Now it's getting, in my area, I'm in zone 8A. Officially our last frost date is the beginning of April. Now this year we actually had a late frost. So I kind of straddle the border of zone 8A and 7B. I have a really long growing season. It's April to November. But I have a really short spring, and we kind of go from cold in the winter to warm really fast. And because of that, it's notoriously difficult to grow things like broccoli and cabbage, any of my brassicas really, in the spring. I have to kind of plant those in the winter. I plant those in the fall. Sometimes I kind of, like, I can get away with planting brassicas in the winter if I provide a little bit of frost protection. But a lot of them, really the best time to grow these things is kind of like in the fall into the early winter and harvest them. For my area, and that's what I'm finding is best. But what I will say is the broccoli is actually looking better than I anticipated it would. This was kind of just an experiment. I just want to see what would happen. And I'm going to let this go as long as it'll go. It's getting warm, so I don't know what's, if I'm actually going to get any substantial broccoli harvest out of it. I think most of this is sprouting broccoli. I'm going to be honest with you. I did not label it when I planted it. So I think this is actually sprouting broccoli. We're going to find out. So this is purple cabbage. There's some green cabbage here. There's some kohlrabi back here. Again, I don't know that if it's going to, it's looking pretty good. I've seen a couple of cabbage worms out here that I've killed, but nothing substantial. So over here, we've got raspberries. This is a whole little raspberry patch. I've planted different varieties, and you know what? I'm really terrible about labeling things. I'm gonna have to look and see what all varieties I have growing. That's actually a blackberry. That I do know. My garden's not perfect. Hopefully your garden's not perfect either. So this bed is, we're kind of finishing up spring crops, right? So what you've kind of seen is we're finishing up spring crops and we're transitioning into our summer plantings. What I have here is a lot of things going to seed. I've got some, I think it's bok choy that's going to seed, bok choy that's also been kind of torn up by pests. It's okay. I'm just kind of letting that happen. I kind of want the seeds to fall in the bed. I have a ton of bok choy seeds. I'm not going to harvest it, but I'm letting that happen until I need to use this space because I want some of those seeds to fall in the bed. And then maybe in the fall, I won't have to plant bok choy here. It'll just kind of come back up. That's the goal. That's the hope. We'll see what happens. My turnips, I have a lot of turnips planted here as well. You'll see they're kind of struggling a bit, starting to get warm. And although I can kind of grow turnips in the heat somewhat, like they'll bulb up, they do struggle. And it's just the name of the game. Okay, here are my carrots. We had a really hard time with carrot germination this year. So quick tip, really interesting tip is whenever you plant carrots, they need cooler temperatures to germinate. They need water. What I have found works best, I will put but I'll show you guys this in the fall when I go to do it again. But when I go to plant my carrots, I will put like a piece of cardboard will work, but like really a board over, like, so I'll like dig a trench like this. It's kind of maybe a little deeper than that. Kind of compact the soil, but not too deep. So I'm going to dig a little bit of a trench. I'm going to sprinkle my seeds, right? And then I'm going to cover it back up. Like I said, you want it a little bit deeper than that. Pat it down. It's really important that you want good contacts, the seeds to contact the soil. A lot of times what I actually do with carrots, it's weird, but I will water the soil before I plant the carrots, so it's nice and moist, right? And that way carrot seeds are really, really tiny. I don't want them to wash away. And then I will do my row of carrots, and then I will throw a board, like a wooden board works the best, over the top of it. Carrots in my area take between like 11 and they can take anywhere really from like 11 to 20 days, depending on the temperature and lots of other factors. But usually within about 2 weeks, I have germination. And so I'll lay a board down on top of the seeds. After I plant them, I'll lay the board on top of the seeds and then come back and pull the board off once the seeds germinate and the carrots will begin to grow. And so you only leave it on there until they germinate, and then you want to take it off right away so that they can get access to the sun. But if you struggle with getting your carrots to germinate, that's a really awesome way to do it. What happened this year though was I had really good germination here. You'll see a couple rows, but I went to do like a staggered planting. So I was trying to do like every 2 weeks. Problem is it just got too hot. We had some warm days, then we had some cold days. So you'll notice I planted a ton of carrots in this space, just like I did in this space. And you'll see only a couple germinated. We'll have much better success in the fall. It's one of those things where I just know that I'm going to have better success growing these things in the fall. I have got some pitiful stuff happening with onions right now. I had really bad germination with my onions. You'll notice I've got more weeds. So as you're out in your garden, if you create a space that you want to be in, if you create a space that you enjoy, you like being out here, it's going to be a whole lot easier to come out and do the work that is required. Like I've got some volunteer tomatoes happening. These are cherry tomatoes from last year. Frankly, because my onions are so sparse, I'm probably going to just let the cherry tomatoes happen. It won't be too much longer before I actually pull these onions out. A few more weeks, maybe a month or so, if that. My garlic is absolutely pitiful. So I had a lot of, I don't know if it was from the straw that I mulched with, and I had hay kind of germinating. I mean, not hay, but wheat germinating because this is wheat straw that I'm using, which is actually, I love using straw, but it's becoming harder to source for some reason, which is why you'll see pine straw in some of my beds now. Don't love mulching with that actually, but it's been easier to source, so we're going to see how that goes. But anyway, my garlic, in my area, I have to plant garlic really in the like December. I really need to plant onions like October, and then my garlic in like December or November. I could probably get away with planting both of them in November or December, but anyway, my garlic, I did not do that this year. I planted it like in January. I think we got cold. There's just been so many things that have happened. We also I had a ton of that wheat germinating that was just kind of taking up the space. I've gotten some of it out, but in doing that, it's kind of disturbed some of the garlic. So garlic has just been a mess this year. We may try something very different for next year. Stay tuned, find out and find out how that goes. We're going to do it together. We're going to walk through it together, and we're going to learn along the way. So I'm showing you all the bad things about my garden too. I'm not going to hide any of that, because I think it's important that we learn that it's okay for things to not go right. It's okay for things to not be perfect. It's just part of it. So this right here is potatoes. What has happened to my potatoes? To be frank with you, I do not know. I'm really investigating. They're like dying though. And I've added fertilizer. I've got like the ones down here look kind of healthy. They germinated a lot later. These did kind of, I planted these, I think in February. You know, I don't expect my potatoes to be really well, you know, ready to harvest until June, but a lot of them are just, they're struggling and I don't know why. I'm doing some research. So moving on to things that are doing well. This is my summer squash bed. Now, what you will notice, this guy right here in the middle, I may not have enough room for him. He's probably going to have to go out. That maybe too. I don't know. I'm kind of letting it happen. If it looks like there's competing space, I'm going to pull it out. Squash really do. Even like this is like most of these are a bush variety. They're a little more compact. They're not as viney. They're the summer squash, but they still require a lot of space and usually 3 feet of space. All right, kale. As warm as it is, I do not expect this kale to be doing as well as it's doing. It's crazy. Like this time last year, I felt like my kale was covered in like bugs and aphids and whiteflies and all the things. This year, my kale is looking really healthy, well into the heat. I don't get it. It makes absolutely no sense, but I'm grateful for it. We are still harvesting kale. We're harvesting lots of this kale, and we're eating it quite often. My Swiss chard, you'll see, is kind of coming up. You'll see my baby's toys over there. The garden is a place to be. It's a place to play. So, not perfect. Okra, I have okra starting to come up. The okra went through some mild cold temperatures. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit stunted. And yes, it is over. I cannot really have this much. See, look, it's time to weed. Let's see. There's 2, and I'm probably gonna have to thin. But I'm letting things kind of get established, and then I will thin to the healthiest plant in the places that I need to. So I want to look at this really quick because this is corn. Now, we had decent germination with our corn. I have a couple different varieties growing in this bed. What I did, so most of these are 80 to 100 days. Now, you'll see that some of these are a little bit further behind. That's because there were some spots that we didn't have perfect germination. I came back, and I'm hoping that it'll all kind of catch up and grow together. It wasn't too awful long behind each other that they started to germinate. What I also found was not everything just germinated at the same time. Even when the things that I planted, it was like, some of it was over a week or 2 that germination was happening. So some things are a little behind other things. And the way that the sun tracks, so the sun tracks from here to here, right? So comes up this way, sets that way. So I'm kind of hoping we'll have decent sun exposure and everything can kind of catch up and grow together. I did go back after this was established, because these are 80 to 100 days it'll take for all of this to be ready. But I went and there's a 60-day corn variety that's in here, smaller corn, that I just seeded along this outside edge. I did it on the other edge over there too. So that's 60-day corn. I wanted to make the best use of this space possible. This is a 4x8 bed, so 32 square feet. And I planted, I think, about 150 stalks of corn. I think it was 150 stalks of corn in here, all total. It's very, very densely planted. And you can do that with corn. I did it successfully last year. I had really good pollination. I didn't have huge ears of corn, but I was okay with that. I would rather have more ears of corn than really big ears of corn. The thing about corn is you have to plant it in a block. So like a 4x4 or this will actually work, this 4x8 square space. But you can't just plant long rows of corn. It won't pollinate well. You have to plant it in a block formation. And I probably would not plant more than a 4x8. For me personally, I wouldn't plant more than a 4x8 without having space in between. You need airflow. You also need adequate airflow. Really, a 4x4 is probably best. It would probably be best if I had a 4x4 and then another 4x4, but I didn't have that. So I'm doing a 4x8. It'll still work. It would have been better to have a little more airflow. It just is what it is. Okay, these are peppers. All of these are peppers. You're going to notice that my peppers are spaced really closely together. Last year, I did not plant my peppers very close together. I have been told by several people, you can plant your pepper plants close together and they will do just fine. You may have smaller peppers, but they like that close spacing. I'm going to try it. If I find that they are too close together, like I'm kind of a little worried about this one. This one shouldn't even be here. It was kind of a volunteer. And then that one back there as well, volunteer. So I'm kind of letting that happen right now. If I do find that they're too close together, then I may either move some of these peppers or just thin them. But I'm going to try it. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to see what happens. Either way, we're going to get peppers, and either way, it's going to be awesome. So you'll notice that my peppers have some yellowing. Why? Peppers do not like the cold. We had a late cold snap. It wasn't a frost, but it just got really cold for a couple of nights. And I did not do enough to protect these. I threw down a thicker layer of mulch. It's kind of like since kind of fizzling out. But I feel like the peppers are starting to catch up, so I'm just letting it happen. The new growth looks really healthy. You see the old growth is that's yellowing, right? I added some nitrogen. That was the other thing. I added some nitrogen not long ago, and this new growth looks really good. It looks really healthy. It's not kind of the same thing with the beans. Beans can tolerate a little bit more cold than the peppers, but these beans were also planted before the peppers. And so they were actually planted, and we did have a very mild frost come through, and I think did a little bit of damage to the beans, but they're starting to outgrow that too. A good fertilizer, I really use organic fertilizers on my plants. I do buy fertilizers and keep in stock fertilizers that are not organic, and I use them responsibly, right? So you don't want to use them constantly, but periodically and using them, it's fine. It's not going to damage your plants. It's not going to damage your soil. Even the chemical fertilizers, as long as you use them responsibly. And what I mean by that is you don't want to come out here constantly getting your plants drug addicted, basically, by feeding them a ton of nitrogen, because those are really high in nitrogen usually. But sometimes to outgrow a little bit of a frost or a little bit of damage or a little bit of stress that the plant has went through, adding something really high in nitrogen, a liquid fertilizer that's high in nitrogen, will just pull them out of that. It just gives them the ability to outgrow whatever issue that they've had, and kind of speed up their healing, speed up their recovery. So I do that in cases where I need to. I add it. So this is a complete and total anomaly. Lettuce, as hot as it's been, should not be doing very well in my garden right now. It might be that the fence right here casts some shade on the lettuce. Maybe. I don't even know. But this lettuce is looking fantastic. It's beautiful. And we've been cutting this, like in a cut and come again style. This was just extra lettuce that I threw in this bed. I didn't really think much about it. I just had some extra lettuce that I didn't have a place for, and I threw it here. Most of my lettuce is actually in my front garden bed, which we'll look at later in another video. But anyway, so I planted lettuce here randomly. It looks amazing. It's doing incredibly well. Here's some cucumbers. Cucumbers are looking great. So over here I have slicer varieties up to this point. A couple different slicer varieties. And then I have pickling cucumbers. Now what you'll notice is, I've got a couple of cucumbers in the same hole. I have this that they're trellis up. It's all gonna be fine. It's all gonna work out. If I do need to thin anything, which I may wind up thinning. There's almost like 2 plants in every hole. So I may wind up thinning a little bit. That's okay. There's some more volunteer tomatoes. I'm probably going to pull those out. I really just don't have the heart to do it right now. I love volunteers. I love seeing volunteer plants come up, and they're oftentimes healthier than the ones I start from seed. It's ridiculous. So I try to encourage a lot of volunteers in my garden. Here's some more green onions. Awesome. I just cut the tops off these and use them that way. I don't usually pull them from here. I can literally just give these things a haircut throughout the season. And I have more green onions coming up in other places, but I think I also have some chives over here. You'll see, but I can give these things a haircut throughout the season and just keep harvesting them. So I like to do that. This is lavender. Okay, I have struggled for 2 years to get lavender to germinate. I have tried all the tricks. I really struggle to get lavender to germinate. And so this year I broke down, I went to Lowe's and I bought a lavender plant. I'm very happy that I did. I like starting things from seed, but sometimes I will buy things that are already started. You know, I'm not going to keep waiting around for it to germinate. I also need to get some more time, some English common time. And yeah, okay. So these, I think I said this. I don't know if I said this part earlier, but these are actually bush beans. So they don't really need to be staked. They're going to be green beans, bush beans that we're going to just harvest throughout the season. And I grew those last year and they were incredibly prolific. Here's some peas that are kind of piddling out, dying off. There's some new growth on that one, which is actually really interesting because, again, we've had really hot days, but then we have these random, like, cool days in the middle of it. It makes absolutely no sense. You'll see there's a lot of, like, the new growth on the beans is looking pretty good, but there was a lot of yellowing previously. I've been hitting them with a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer to kind of get them through where they had went through a cold snap. This soil is also not great. These are new beds. And soil gets better and better over time. So the soil is not perfect. It's not great, but that's okay. Okay, so these beans will actually grow up these poles. They are pole beans. I have several different varieties in here. I also have some back here. It's kind of an experiment because you see, this is not very high. I really need to put more bamboo posts. So anyway, this is an experiment. These beans, you'll notice that this is not very high. I don't know how these beans are going to grow up it. I really need something like a cattle panel trellis. Next year I'm going to try to do that, but I want to see how they grow. I'm out of bamboo posts. I don't know. I may wind up having to do something else, but for the meantime, I'm planting this here. It's an experiment. We're going to see how it grows. It may not be tall enough. Whenever, like pole beans, runner beans, they like to grow up. So, okay. These are tomatoes. You'll notice these are spaced really, really close together. I have 8-foot posts here. And they're actually about 1.5 feet in the ground. They're about 18 inches in the ground. These 8-foot posts. I really should have put them 2 feet in the ground. This will work for this season. So I have 8 tomatoes that are 4 slicers right here. And then these 4 are paste tomatoes, 2 San Marzanos, and then 2 other paste tomatoes that I cannot remember the name of them right this moment. They are indeterminate. These are all indeterminate tomatoes. They're going to grow up this post. I'm going to single stem prune them. Okay, so the single stem prune, see this right here, in the joint, in the elbow is growing. This will make if I leave this here, it will make a whole other tomato plant. We don't want that because we're single stem pruning it. And yet my chickens are incredibly inquisitive. I'm over here by their coop, and so they want to know what I'm doing. So you'll hear them clucking in the background. Okay, so here we go. So here's a stem, here's your main stem, here's some leaves that come off of that, here's a stem that comes off of your main stem. In between this right here, this is called a sucker. Now, interestingly, you can pull this off. So I just kind of come through and do this. If it was a thicker stem, like if it had become thick, I would go ahead and use pruners or snips. I'm just going to throw that right there. Interesting enough, I could take this, if I wanted to, I could take this, put it in a glass of water, roots would begin to develop, and I could plant this, and it would become a whole tomato plant. It's really easy to propagate tomato plants. So I like to start things from seed, but last year I actually started I had some early girl tomatoes, some hybrid early girl tomatoes that I bought at a big box store. I started a bunch of tomatoes from seed too, but with those early, girl tomatoes, I wound up really liking them. They wound up being pretty prolific and kind of disease resistant and pest resistant in my area. So I decided I wanted more of those in the garden. I took a couple of those suckers and actually planted them. I could have made 10 more, 15 more tomato plants. I actually wound up only making 2 more, but that was just because of space. So now you'll notice that some of these are in cages. I do not like putting tomatoes in cages because the tomato cages are terrible for tomatoes. They are marketed for tomatoes. Look, You see, tomato cage. It's right there. Right? They're marketed for tomatoes. The problem is that tomatoes can get to be 10 feet tall if you take care of them. The tomato cages are just not big enough, sturdy enough, hardy enough to hold on to the tomatoes. Well, that's true for indeterminate tomatoes. When it comes to determinate tomatoes, so indeterminate tomatoes means that tomato is going to grow all the way through the season, right? And it's going to keep growing until the frost comes along and kills it. And a determinate tomato, on the other hand, and it's going to keep producing, and through the whole season, it'll keep producing tomatoes. But a determinate tomato, on the other hand, is going to grow to a determined height. It's going to set all of its fruit at one time, or mostly at one time, and then it's going to die. And it's only going to get so big. Sometimes determinate tomatoes, I say that, but sometimes determinate tomatoes will have 2 or 3 flushes of fruit before they fully die. But it only gets to a determined height. Indeterminate means it'll keep growing until the frost kills it. Determinate means it gets to a determinate height. The height is already determined. So the determinate tomatoes don't get very big. Because of that, I can use tomato cages for them. The other thing I used tomato cages for, last year, I had really good success using it for my cherry tomatoes. I didn't prune my cherry tomatoes. I grew a really cheap packet of seeds. I think it literally was from the dollar store, of just red cherry tomatoes. And I had really good success with the cherry tomatoes. My chickens are clucking and fighting with each other. I need to throw some stuff in there for them to scratch at. But anyway, so this year I have some cherry tomatoes that I've never grown before that are bigger. I don't know that this tomato cage is going to work for them, but I'm trying it. If it doesn't work, I will stake these too. Probably with some bamboo stakes. I'm going to do a teepee the same way I did with the beans. I'll probably have a teepee that kind of supports the cherry tomatoes, and I'll just grow it up there. We're going to find out. We'll see. Okay, one of my favorite things about my garden is my strawberry patch. Some of my tomatoes. Some of these strawberries are on their second year. Some are on their first year planted. And again, weeds. It's really important that as you're out, the more time you spend in your garden, the more you're going to deal with the weeds. Make it a space that you want to be in. Total side note, but make your garden a space that you want to be in. Make it something beautiful. Make it something lovely. Make it a space that you can't wait to go out into. If your garden is just a place that you go to like work and harvest food and it's something like it's a chore, then you're going to spend a whole lot less time in it and you're going to dread going out. The thing about my garden is it's a place I always want to be. And so that makes it a lot easier when the heat of the summer comes and it's absolutely miserable. It makes it a lot easier to be out here because it's not just about growing food. It's a place I enjoy being. But frankly, gardening is a lot of work. And yeah, I really get sick of pulling weeds. I'll just be honest with you. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Some of these are really small. The birds are kind of helping themselves. I do have bird netting I need to throw back over it. I kind of took it off though for a little bit because it seemed like the strawberries were struggling just a tad. Okay, so this is nasturtium marigolds. I just built this bed yesterday along the chicken run. I just did something that I kind of I wanted the nasturtium to kind of grow up toward, I don't know that that's going to actually happen. This over here used to be compost. That's just some wood chips piled up. Here's another view of my garden. Again, it's a space I like to be. That way over there, you'll see that is actually blueberries. So this used to be my compost pile. This is my old compost pile before I moved it over here. It kind of sucks because I literally created the compost pile as a focal point. That was not my intention. By bordering this around it, like on either side, it creates a focal point for the compost bed. Totally, again, not my intention. I'm gonna have to work on that at some point. But so this was a compost pile. There was a lot of seeds in here, more potatoes, you'll see. And when I moved the compost, we had a lot of volunteer seeds that just started coming up, and I've left them. I'm just letting it happen. Now, I decided to kind of, because the space was so ugly, because the compost was here, I bought, this is salvia, and I cannot remember what this is. Actually, might be struggling just a tad, to be honest. Might be struggling just a tad. But they're really beautiful. I bought them from a big box store and planted them here. I like flowers and something that brings the pollinators and the beneficial insects and something that just adds color to the garden. So I'm growing that. That is rhubarb in the back. I actually thought my rhubarb died, but it started coming back. So we're going to see how that goes and what we get. If we get to harvest some rhubarb, that would be really, really cool. I kind of want to make rhubarb pie. We're going to find out. We're going to see how that goes. So as I was editing this video, I realized I never ended the video. So let me end it by saying this. I'm so grateful and so thankful that you spent today with me going through my garden. May your garden be full of grace, and may you be abundantly blessed. Until next time.